Today, we're diving deep into a topic that touches every single life on this planet, often in ways we don't even realize until it's starkly apparent. Imagine this. You wake up, stumble to the bathroom, turn the tap, and nothing. Not a drip. You try the kitchen sink. Same result. Panic starts to set in. How will you brush your teeth? Make coffee? Flush the toilet? Take a shower? Suddenly, this invisible, abundant resource you rely on for everything is gone. For billions of people around the world, this isn't a hypothetical morning nightmare. It's a daily reality or a looming threat. We turn on our taps and expect clean, safe water to flow endlessly. But is this endless? Is it actually endless? And is it clean and safe for everyone? What exactly is water scarcity? Is it just about deserts and droughts, or is it creeping closer to places we never expected? How does a lack of clean water ripple outwards, affecting health, food, economies, and even peace? And most importantly, what can we as individuals and as a global community actually do about this growing crisis? Welcome, my friends. I'm Danny, and this is a new episode from English Plus Podcast. Now, stick with me today as we're going to explore the complex world of water scarcity and access to clean water. We'll unravel the scale of the problem, investigate its far-reaching consequences, and look at the innovative solutions and crucial actions being taken. Then, as always on English Plus Podcast, we'll shift gears to sharpen your English skills. We'll zoom in on key vocabulary and phrases used today, helping you talk about this vital issue with confidence. We'll tackle a speaking challenge focused on expressing cause and effect. After that, we'll dive into grammar and writing, equipping you with the tools to craft persuasive arguments for a related writing challenge. And finally, we'll open the floor for discussion, posing some thought-provoking questions I'd love you to ponder and share your thoughts on in the comments on our website, EnglishPlusPodcast.com, or over on our Patreon page. So, my friends, grab your reusable water bottles, get comfortable, and let's explore the critical issue of water. All right, let's start with the basics. When we talk about water scarcity, what do we actually mean? It sounds simple. Not enough water, right? Well, yes and no. It's a bit more nuanced than that. Experts often talk about two main types of water scarcity. The first is physical water scarcity. This is what probably comes to mind first. Regions where the demand for water outstrips the natural available water resources. Think arid and semi-arid regions, deserts, areas prone to severe drought. The environment simply doesn't provide enough water to meet the needs of the population, agriculture, and industry. Climate change is exacerbating this in many places, altering rainfall patterns and increasing the frequency and intensity of droughts. Now, we see pictures of cracked earth and empty riverbeds. That's often a visual representation of physical scarcity. But there's another often overlooked type, economic water scarcity. This is a situation where a region might actually have sufficient water resource available, but lacks the necessary infrastructure, investment, or human capacity to access and distribute it properly. Imagine a place with plentiful rainfall and rivers, but no pipes to bring water to homes, no treatment plants to make it safe to drink or potable, or where the existing infrastructure is crumbling and inefficient. People might have to walk miles to collect water, often from unsafe sources, or pay exorbitant prices for it. Well, this is a problem rooted in poverty, inequality, and poor governance. Billions of people face economic water scarcity, even in areas that aren't necessarily deserts. Now I want you to pause and think. Think about your own community. Do you perceive any form of water scarcity? Is it more physical, economic, or perhaps a combination? Have you ever personally experienced a significant water shortage, even temporarily? What's that feel like? I would love you to share your thoughts in the comments. But now let's get back to our topic. My friends, the scale of this crisis is staggering. According to the UN, around 2 billion people currently live in countries experiencing high water stress. And it gets even more concerning. Nearly half the global population could be living in areas facing water scarcity by as early as 2025, which is this year. That's right now, essentially. And around 700 million people could be displaced by intense water scarcity by 2030. This isn't a distant future problem. It's happening now, and it's accelerating. And now to really understand what's happening, let's ask ourselves, what's driving this? Well, it's a complex interplay of factors. First, we got population growth. More people means more demand for drinking water, sanitation, food, and goods. Now, you might ask, food and goods, what does that have to do with water? Well, for food, that requires water for agriculture. And for goods, that requires water for industry. So yes, when you think about food and goods, these definitely affect our water supply. But population growth is not everything. It's not the full picture. Second, we've got economic development and changing consumption patterns. As economies grow, industrial water use often increases, and diets shift towards more water-intensive foods like meat. Well, think about the water footprint of a simple cotton t-shirt or a burger. It's surprisingly high. Third, we've got climate change. As I mentioned earlier, this is a huge factor. It disrupts predictable weather patterns, leading to more extreme droughts in some areas and intense floods, which can contaminate water sources in others. Melting glaciers, a crucial source of fresh water for many regions, also contribute to long-term water security. And fourth, we've got pollution. This diminishes the amount of usable fresh water. Industrial discharge, agricultural runoff, like pesticides and fertilizers, untreated sewage, all these contaminate rivers, lakes, and groundwaters or aquifers, making water unsafe for human consumption and harming ecosystems. Now, cleaning up polluted water is expensive and difficult, effectively reducing the available supply. So, my friends, water scarcity isn't just about not having rain. It's a complex web of environmental, social, and economic factors converging to create a critical challenge for humanity. Understanding these different facets, physical versus economic scarcity, and the key drivers is the first key towards addressing the problem effectively. So that was just a quick overview. Now we'll get in a little deeper. We'll talk about some ripple of impact beyond the empty glass. That's coming next. Don't go anywhere. I'll be right back. Okay, so we've established that water scarcity is a widespread and growing problem. But what are the actual consequences? Why is it such a crisis? The impacts ripple outwards, affecting nearly every aspect of human life and the environment. Now, let's explore some of the major ones. Perhaps the most immediate and obvious impact is on health. Lack of access to clean water and adequate sanitation facilities is a primary cause of numerous waterborne diseases. Think cholera, typhoid, dysentery, hepatitis A. These diseases disproportionately affect children and vulnerable populations. When people are forced to drink contaminated water or lack water for basic hygiene like hand washing, disease spreads rapidly. The World Health Organization estimates that hundreds of thousands of people die each year from diarrheal diseases caused by unsafe water and poor sanitation. It is a preventable tragedy directly linked to water access. And next, consider food security. Agriculture is by far the largest consumer of fresh water globally, accounting for roughly 70% of all water withdrawals. When water becomes scarce, irrigation systems fail, crops wither, and livestock suffer. This leads to reduced harvests, higher food prices, and ultimately, hunger and malnutrition, especially in regions heavily reliant on agriculture. Smallholder farmers, who produce a significant portion of the world's food, are often the hardest hit as they lack the resources to adapt to water shortages. My friends, the connection is direct. No water, no food. But that's not everything. Water scarcity also significantly hampers economic development. Industries rely on water for various processes: manufacturing, cooling, cleaning, energy production, the hydropower, cooling thermal power plants. When water is unavailable or unreliable, industrial output suffers, Businesses may relocate or shut down, leading to job losses and slower economic growth. Energy production can be curtailed, leading to power outages that further disrupt economic activity. The lack of basic water and sanitation services also impacts productivity, as people, and unfortunately often women and girls, spend hours collecting water instead of working or attending school. Now let me ask you this. Can you think of a specific industry in your region that relies heavily on water? How might water scarcity impact that industry and the local economy? Think about that and share your thoughts in the comments on our website or on our Patreon page. Now, let's continue. Well, we talked about some of the impacts, but that's definitely not everything. Water scarcity can be a major driver of conflict and instability. It can be that serious. Competition over dwindling water resources, especially shared rivers or aquifers that cross regional or national borders, can escalate tensions between communities, regions, or even countries. Historically, there have been disputes over water access, and many experts warn that water wars could become more frequent in the future as climate change intensifies scarcity in vulnerable transboundary basins. Water scarcity can also contribute to migration, as people are forced to leave their homes in search of water and better livelihoods, potentially leading to social unrest in the areas they move to. And finally, let's not forget the environmental impact. Over-extraction of water from rivers and aquifers harms aquatic ecosystems, leading to biodiversity loss. Wetlands dry up, fish populations decline, and the natural balance is disrupted. Reduced river flows can lead to saltwater intrusion into coastal aquifers, contaminating freshwater supplies. The environment provides the very water resources we depend on, and damaging it through unsustainable water management practices creates a vicious cycle. So you see, my friends, the lack of clean water isn't just an inconvenience. It's a health crisis, a food crisis, an economic impediment, a potential source of conflict, and an environmental disaster all rolled into one. The ripple effect is immense, touching lives in profound and often devastating ways. And remember, it's never far from home. Don't ever think that you're safe from this problem. It's affecting us all, no matter who we are, no matter where we live. Well, my friends, that's about the impacts. Next, let's try and search for solutions. Let's try to turn the tide. That's coming next. Don't go anywhere. I'll be right back. Well, I know. Hearing about the scale and impact of the water crisis can feel overwhelming, even disheartening. But the story doesn't end there. Humanity is incredibly resourceful, and there's a tremendous amount of work being done globally to address water scarcity and improve access to clean water. Now, let's explore some of the key solution pathways. One major area is infrastructure and technology. This involves both large-scale projects and innovative new approaches. Now, let's talk about some examples. Improving existing infrastructure. Simply fixing leaky pipes can save vast amounts of water. Many urban water systems lose a significant percentage of their water through leaks before it even reaches the consumer. Investing in maintenance and upgrades is crucial. And we also have building new infrastructure. Well, this can include constructing dams and reservoirs to store water, building pipelines to transport water to areas in need, and developing rainwater harvesting systems at various scales, from household tanks to larger community projects. And there's also water treatment and recycling. Advanced treatment technologies allow us to purify wastewater to a standard where it can be reused for non-potable purposes like irrigation, industrial processes, or even after further treatment for drinking water, often called toilet to tap. And I know that's not the most delicious name, but that's what they call it. But anyway, this process significantly reduces the pressure on fresh water sources. And we also have desalination. Well, this technology removes salt from seawater or brackish water to produce fresh water. While energy intensive and often expensive, the costs are decreasing, making it a viable option for coastal regions with high water stress, particularly in wealthier nations or critical situations. Another critical area is water conservation and efficiency. This means using the water we do have more wisely across all sectors. Let's talk about agriculture first. Now, since farming uses the most water, improving irrigation efficiency is key. Techniques like drip irrigation, that means delivering water directly to plant roots, Or precision agriculture, using sensors and data to optimize water use, can drastically reduce water consumption compared to traditional flood irrigation. And choosing less water-intensive crops suitable for the local climate also helps. And what about industries? Well, industries can adopt water-saving technologies, recycle water within their processes, and implement stricter water management practices. But that's not only about agriculture and industry. There's also something to be done at the domestic front. At the individual level, simple actions add up. Fixing leaks promptly, installing water-efficient appliances, toilets, shower heads, washing machines, etc., being mindful of water use in gardens, and generally adopting water-saving habits, all these help. Public awareness campaigns play a vital role here. But of course, these are not the only solutions. We also have policy, governance, and management. And perhaps these are the most complex but essential pieces of the puzzle. Now, what about water pricing and allocation? Implementing fair and effective water pricing mechanisms can incentivize conservation. Establishing clear water rights and allocation systems, especially for shared resources, is crucial to prevent conflict and ensure equitable distribution. And there's also the Integrated Water Resources Management, the IWRM. Well, this approach advocates for managing water in a holistic way, considering all uses, agriculture, industry, domestic, environment, and involving all stakeholders in the decision-making process. It aims to balance social, economic, and environmental needs. And there's also transboundary cooperation. Now, for rivers and aquifers shared by multiple countries, international agreements and cooperative management frameworks are essential to ensure sustainable and peaceful use of the resource. And of course, investing in sanitation. Improving sanitation is intrinsically linked to protecting water quality. Proper sewage treatment prevents contamination of water sources. And finally, of course, there's maybe what I'm doing here, maybe what you're doing listening to me and telling people about it. Education and awareness are fundamental. Understanding the value of water, the challenges of scarcity, and the available solutions empowers individuals and communities to take action and demand change from policymakers and industries. So let me ask you this. Considering these different types of solutions, infrastructure, conservation, policy, education, which do you think holds the most promise for tackling water scarcity globally? And are there any potential downsides or challenges to implementing these solutions? Well, think about it and share your answers with me in the comment section on our podcast or on our Patreon page. So, my friends, it's clear there's no single magic bullet. Addressing the water crisis requires a multifaceted approach, combining technological innovation, smarter management practices, policy reforms, international cooperation, and a fundamental shift in how we value and use water in our daily lives. It is a challenge, a big one, I might add, yes, but one with achievable solutions if we act collectively and decisively. And talking about acting, next we're gonna get practical. We're gonna move this problem from global crisis to local action. That's coming next. Don't go anywhere. I'll be right back. All right, so we've talked about the big picture, the definitions, the impacts, the potential solutions. But how does this translate into real-world situations? And more importantly, what can we actually do? So let's get practical and look at some case studies and actionable steps. Now, let me start with a case study. Let me tell you about Cape Town's Day Zero, which was a crisis averted. Now, remember Cape Town, South Africa, hitting the headlines a few years back? The city was facing an unprecedented water crisis due to a prolonged drought, exacerbated by climate change and increasing demand. They were counting down to Day Zero, the day the municipal taps would effectively run dry, forcing residents to queue for rationed water at collection points. So what happened? Well, facing imminent disaster, the city implemented drastic measures. There were severe water restrictions. Households were limited to just 50 liters of water per person per day. Well, think about that. A typical 8-minute shower can use more than 50 liters. And because they put this limitation, there were heavy tariffs that were imposed on excessive use. And of course, there was the public awareness campaign. A massive, relentless campaign educated citizens about the severity of the crisis and promoted water-saving techniques. The concept of Day Zero itself was a powerful communication tool. And there were some technological solutions. Efforts were made to augment supply through groundwater extraction, small-scale desalination, and water reuse projects, although these played a smaller role than demand management in the short term. And there were also agricultural cuts. Water allocations for agriculture were significantly reduced. What was the result? Well, Cape Town's residents responded remarkably. Collective water consumption plummeted by over 50%. Combined with some late-season rainfall, the city managed to push back day zero indefinitely. So what can we learn? Cape Town demonstrated the power of demand management and public participation. When faced with a clear and present danger, people can change their behavior dramatically. It highlighted the importance of clear communication, strong governance, and equitable, though strict, restrictions. It also served as a wake-up call for other cities worldwide facing similar risks. However, it also exposed social inequalities, as wealthier residents could afford technological fixes like boreholes, while poorer communities relied more heavily on behavioral change and faced greater hardship. So that was about Cape Town. Next, we're going to talk about the Aral Sea. Cautionary tale. Don't go anywhere. I'll be right back. Now, let's look at a different kind of case. An environmental catastrophe driven by unsustainable water management. The Aral Sea, once the fourth largest lake in the world, located between Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan. In the 1960s, the Soviet Union diverted the two major rivers feeding the Aral Sea, the Amudarya and Sirdarya, to irrigate vast cotton fields in the arid desert. The goal was economic development, turning the region into a major cotton producer. The consequences were devastating and long-lasting. There was the environmental collapse. The sea shrank dramatically, losing more than 90% of its volume. Salinity levels soared, killing off fish populations and destroying the thriving fishing industry that employed tens of thousands. And there was also a health crisis. The exposed seabed, contaminated with pesticides, fertilizers, and salt from decades of agriculture, became a source of toxic dust storms. These storms spread pollutants hundreds of kilometers, leading to soaring rates of respiratory illnesses, cancers, and infant mortality in the surrounding region. And there was also climate change. The shrinking sea altered the local climate, making winters colder and summers hotter and drier. And of course, the economic ruin. The fishing industry collapsed, communities were abandoned, and the region suffered severe economic hardship. What's the lesson here? The Aral Sea is a stark warning about the dangers of large-scale water diversion projects that ignore environmental consequences and long-term sustainability. It highlights the interconnectedness of water, environment, economy, and human health. While there are ongoing efforts to partially restore the North Aral Sea, the damage done is immense and serves as a powerful cautionary tale against prioritizing short-term economic gains over ecological balance and sustainable resource management. So, we talked about two case studies, but let's talk about something that we can do. Let's talk about our action plan, how we can make a difference. Hearing these stories might make you feel small, but individual and community actions absolutely matter, and they can definitely make a difference. They create ripples of change and contribute to the larger solutions we discussed. So what can we do? Well, let's start with individual actions we can do at home. First, we can be water aware. Understand your own water footprint. How much water do you use daily? Use online calculators or track your bills. Awareness is the first step. And second, fix leaks. A dripping tap or a leaky toilet can waste thousands of liters per year. Check regularly and fix promptly. And install water-saving devices. Low-flow shower heads, faucet aerators, and dual-flush toilets are relatively inexpensive and can significantly reduce water use without sacrificing comfort. And next, practice water-wise habits. Take shorter showers. Turn off the tap while brushing teeth or washing dishes. Only run full loads in washing machines and dishwashers. Collect rainwater for gardening if possible. And mind your garden. Choose native or drought-tolerant plants. Water early morning or late evening to reduce evaporation. And use mulch to retain soil moisture. And eat consciously. Remember the water footprint of food we talked about earlier. Reducing consumption of water-intensive foods like meat, especially beef, can make a difference, can make a big difference actually. Reducing food waste also saves the water used to produce that food. And dispose responsibly. Never pour chemicals, oils, or medications down the drain or toilet because they pollute water sources. All right, great. We started with what we can do as individuals in our own homes. But what about us as communities? Now, on the community level, we can support local initiatives. Are there local groups working on river cleanups, water conservation education, or advocating for better water management? Get involved or support them if you can. And advocate. Contact your local representatives or water utility. Ask about water loss rates in your area, investments in infrastructure, and water conservation programs. Advocate for water-wise policies. And of course, educate others. Share what you've learned with friends, family, and colleagues. Collective awareness drives collective action. And now let's take it even a step further. What can we do globally? Well, we can support organizations. Consider supporting reputable NGOs working on clean water access and sanitation projects in vulnerable communities worldwide. For example, there's water.org, Charity Water, UNICEF's water programs, and these are some of the examples of these NGOs. But it's not just about supporting organizations. We can make informed consumer choices. You can support businesses that prioritize water stewardship and sustainability in their supply chains. And of course, stay informed. Keep learning about global water issues and advocate for international cooperation and policies that promote sustainable water management for all. Now I have a question for you. Looking at this action plan at all levels, the individual, the community level, and the global level, which step feels most achievable for you right now? Is there anything you're already doing? What's one new action you could commit to trying this week? Well, let me know in the comments, my friends. And remember, every drop saved counts. While large-scale policy and infrastructure changes are essential, individual and community actions build momentum, demonstrate commitment, and contribute directly to conserving our most precious resource. It's about shifting our mindset from viewing water as an infinite commodity to valuing it as the finite, vital resource it truly is. And with that, my friends, we come to the end of our topic for today, which is a very important topic. I hope you all take this topic very seriously because it is. Even if it's not happening in your area right now, but if it happens somewhere else, it will come to you sooner or later if we don't take action. We can do what we can, of course, but of course we can let people know about the importance of this topic. So now that we've talked about the water scarcity problem, the effects of this problem, the impacts of this problem, what we can do, etc., now it's time to focus on language. Because remember, this is English Plus podcast, right? So we do talk about important topics, but of course, we also talk about the language we can use to even talk about these topics or write about these topics. That's coming next. We're going to focus on language. Don't go anywhere. I'll be right back. All right, we've delved deep into the critical issue of water scarcity. Now let's switch gears and focus on the language we've used, helping you not only understand this topic better, but also discuss it more effectively in English. Well, this section is divided into two parts, vocabulary and speaking, followed by grammar and writing. So let's start with the vocabulary and speaking. Let's zoom in on some key vocabulary we encountered today, because understanding these words and phrases is crucial for grasping the nuances of the water crisis and for articulating your own thoughts on the subject. Well, let's start with the topic itself, the noun phrase, the big one, water scarcity. This is our core topic, right? And I'm pretty sure you really understand what it is by now, but just to be sure, this word or this phrase refers to the lack of sufficient available water resources to meet the demands of water usage within a region. Now, of course, we use it all over the place, especially if you remember we talked about physical and economic water scarcity, the two types. Now, of course, water scarcity means not having enough water, either because it physically isn't there or because there's no way to access it safely. We can use it in examples like climate change is expected to intensify water scarcity in many parts of the world. So that was about water scarcity. Then we got another word, potable. That means safe to drink or drinkable. Well, we used it when we talked about lack of infrastructure. That means water isn't treated to make it potable. The meaning is clean enough for human consumption without risk of illness. That's the meaning of potable. We can use it like access to potable water is a fundamental human right. And next we got aquifer, which is an underground layer of water-bearing permeable rock. Rock fractures or unconsolidated materials like gravel, sand, or silt from which groundwater can be extracted using a water well. In our context, we said pollution can contaminate rivers, lakes, and groundwater, or aquifers. The meaning here again is a natural underground reservoir of fresh water. Now, let me give you another example how we can use it in different contexts. We can say over-extraction is depleting aquifers faster than they can naturally recharge. And next we got desalination. That's the process of removing salts and other minerals from seawater or brackish water to produce fresh water. In our context, we said desalination is becoming a viable option for coastal regions. And again, it means making salt water drinkable. Now, let me give you an example. We can say, while effective, desalination plants are often energy intensive and expensive. We also have another interesting word we talked about, infrastructure, which is the basic physical and organizational structures and facilities like buildings, roads, power supplies, pipes, treatment plants, all needed for the operation of a society or enterprise. In our context, we said economic water scarcity occurs when a region lacks the necessary infrastructure. And again, the meaning is the essential systems and facilities that allow a country or region to function. In this case, specifically related to water delivery and treatment. For example, we can say investing in aging water infrastructure is crucial to prevent leaks and ensure water quality. So that was about infrastructure. Next, we got sanitation. These are the conditions relating to public health, especially the provision of clean drinking water and adequate sewage disposal. In our context, we said lack of access to clean water and adequate sanitation facilities is a primary cause of disease. And again, when we talk about sanitation, we're talking about systems for dealing with human waste and maintaining hygiene to protect public health. We can say, for example, improved sanitation is key to preventing the spread of waterborne diseases. That brings me to the next word, or the next phrase, waterborne diseases. Now, these are the diseases caused by pathogenic microorganisms that are transmitted in contaminated water. In our context, we said lack of sanitation leads to numerous waterborne diseases like cholera and typhoid. And again, remember, the meaning is illnesses you get from drinking or being exposed to dirty water. For example, millions suffer from preventable waterborne diseases each year, which is a shame because these are preventable. But that was about waterborne diseases, my friends. Next, we got conservation. That's the act of conserving something, in particular, the preservation, protection, or restoration of the natural environment and wildlife. Now, of course, in our context, we specifically talked about saving water. In our context, we said another critical area is water conservation and efficiency. And again, the meaning of conservation is protecting and saving water resources using less water, of course, in our context. For example, we can say water conservation measures are essential in drought-prone areas. Okay, so that was about conservation. Let's move on to the next keyword, ripple effect. That's the continuing and spreading results of an event or action. In our context, we said the ripple effect of water scarcity is immense, touching lives in profound ways. And here we mean how one problem, like the lack of water obviously, causes a series of other problems in different areas, whether these are health problems, food problems, or economical problems. And now let's use it in an example. The factory closure had a negative ripple effect throughout the local economy. So that's for our ripple effect. Next, we got governance. That's the action or manner of governing a state, organization, etc. The system by which entities are directed and controlled. In our context, of course, we talked about how water resources are managed and regulated. In our context, we said this is a problem rooted in poverty, inequality, and poor governance. And the meaning here is the systems, the policies, the institutions responsible for managing water resources. For example, we can say effective water governance requires transparency and stakeholder participation. So that was about governance. Next, we got sustainable. And that means able to be maintained at a certain rate or level, conserving an ecological balance by avoiding depletion of natural resources. That's what we talk about when we say sustainable. In our context, when we're talking about the Aral Sea, we said prioritizing short-term economic gains over ecological balance and sustainable resource management. The meaning here obviously is using resources in a way that meets current needs without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs too. And let me give you an example. We need to transition to more sustainable agricultural practices to conserve water. And finally, we've got exacerbate. Well, that means to make a problem, bad situation, or negative feeling worse. Now, in our context, we said climate change is exacerbating physical scarcity in many places. And here the meaning is to intensify or worsen something that is already bad. Now, let me give you an example. Poor planning can exacerbate the impacts of a natural disaster. So these were the words that I wanted to share with you, my friends. Now, let's move to our speaking challenge, expressing cause and effect. When you want to discuss complex issues like water scarcity, it's crucial to clearly link causes and effects. Now, we did this throughout the episode, of course. But now let me share some language tools with you that can help you do this as well. Let me start with cause connectors. These introduce the reason why something happens. We use because of, due to, owing to, plus a noun phrase. For example, due to prolonged drought, Cape Town faced day zero. Or many diseases spread because of contaminated water. We can also use since, as, because, plus a clause. We can say, since agriculture consumes so much water, efficiency is key. Or, as populations grow, demand for water increases. And we can also use the phrase, the reason for something is. For example, the reason for the Aral Sea shrinking is the diversion of its feeder rivers. So we talked about the cause connectors you can use to express cause and effect. But what about the effect? Let's talk about effect connectors. Well, these introduce the result or consequence. We can use as a result, consequently, therefore, thus, hence, plus a clause. For example, you can say, rivers were diverted. As a result, the Aral Sea shrank. Or you can say, pollution contaminates water sources. Consequently, less potable water is available. We can also say the city implemented restrictions. Therefore, day zero was averted. But that's not everything. We can also say lead to, result in, or cause plus a noun phrase. We can say, for example, lack of sanitation can lead to waterborne diseases. Or over-extraction results in aquifer depletion. Or poor governance can cause economic water scarcity. And if you want to use an informal one, we can say so plus clause. We can say infrastructure is crumbling, so water losses are high. And what about verbs indicating cause and effect? We can use contribute to. For example, we can say population growth contributes to increased water demand. We can use trigger. We can say water disputes can trigger conflict. We can use impact and effect. We can say scarcity negatively impacts economic development. So now that we've talked about some of the ways we can use cause connectors, effect connectors, and some verbs indicating cause and effect, here's the speaking challenge for you. I want you to choose one of the impacts of water scarcity we discussed. For example, health, food security, conflict, environment. And I want you to prepare a short 1 to 2 minute explanation of this impact. Your task is to explain the connection between water scarcity and your chosen impact using at least 3 different cause and effect connectors or verbs from the list I just gave you. And try to use some of the key vocabulary we just discussed as well, like potable, sanitation, aquifer, sustainable, or any of the other related words that we used in our episode. And I want you to practice doing that. Record yourself speaking. Listen back. Does the connection between cause and effect sound clear and logical? Are you using the connectors correctly? Try explaining it to a friend or family member. See if they can understand it clearly as it is meant to be. Well, this practice will help you articulate complex relationships clearly and confidently, which is a vital skill not just for discussing water scarcity, but for many academic and professional situations. Well, my friend, that was our vocabulary section and our speaking challenge, but we still have our grammar and writing part from our language section, and that's coming next. Don't go anywhere. I'll be right back. Now, let's move on to applying our understanding and language skills to writing. Now, remember, effective writing allows us to analyze issues, persuade others, and propose solutions all crucial when dealing with topics like water scarcity. Now, I want you to imagine your local community, whether it's a town, city, or region, is starting to experience signs of water stress. For example, occasional restrictions, concerns about future supply, visible pollution in local water bodies. I want you to write a persuasive letter around 300 to 400 words to your local government council or water authority. The objective is advocate for the implementation of 2 specific measures to improve water conservation and or protect local water sources. Now, in the content, I want you to briefly state your concern about water stress in the community, clearly propose your 2 specific measures, for example, launching a public awareness campaign focused on leak detection, offering rebates for water-saving appliances, stricter regulations on industrial water discharge, investing in green infrastructure like rain gardens to manage stormwater. And I also want you to explain why these measures are important and what positive effects they could have. And remember here to use your cause and effect language we just talked about. And conclude with a polite call to action, urging them to consider and implement your suggestions. Now let me share some grammar and writing tips for success, for you to succeed in this writing challenge. To write a compelling, persuasive letter, you'll need specific grammar tools and writing techniques. Now, let me start with modal verbs for persuasion and suggestion. Now, modal verbs are essential for expressing necessity, obligation, possibility, and making polite suggestions. Now, we got the strong necessity or obligation, must and have to. For example, we must act now to conserve water. Industries have to comply with stricter regulations. And while they're kind of the same, use must for strong conviction and use have to when you want to imply external obligation. But your suggestions don't have to be in the form of strong necessity or obligation. They can be recommendation or advice. And in this case, you could use should or ought to. For example, the council should launch an awareness campaign, or we ought to invest in fixing leaks. Now, should is more common, obviously, but you can use ought to if you want. And there's also the possibility or potential. We can use could, might, or may. For example, we can say, implementing rebates could encourage homeowners to install efficient toilets. Or, better management might prevent future shortages. Or we can say, green infrastructure may also improve local biodiversity. And of course, we can use polite suggestion or request using could or would. For example, we can say, could you please consider implementing a rebate program? Or we would urge the council to prioritize water infrastructure upgrades. So that was about the modal verbs that you can definitely use in your writing. But there's more. You can also use conditional sentences, the if clauses. Well, these are perfect for explaining cause and effect and outlining potential consequences or benefits. Well, we can use the first conditional, which is a real possibility, and the structure of this is if plus present simple, will plus the base form. Now, we use it for likely future outcomes. For example, we can say, if we implement stricter regulations, water quality will improve. Or, if the council offers rebates, more people will likely buy water-saving devices. So that is about the first conditional. What about the second conditional? Well, the second conditional, we use it to talk about a hypothetical or unreal possibility. And the structure goes like if plus past simple and would plus the base form. We use it for hypothetical situations or to emphasize a desired outcome that isn't currently happening. For example, we can say, if everyone saved just 10 liters a day, we would see a significant impact. Or, if the government invested more in infrastructure, we wouldn't lose so much water to leaks. Now, although this might be a useful tool, talking about the second conditional, of course, I want you to be careful when you use it in a persuasive letter. Maybe you should try to focus more on achievable actions using the first conditional or modals. Don't use a lot of hypotheticals, because that definitely spreads some negative vibes in your writing. But it's a tool that you can use if you have to. But that's not everything. You can also use the zero conditional, which is about general truths. That's if plus present simple and present simple without will. And we use it for facts. We use it to talk about general truths or facts. For example, we can say if water is polluted, it becomes unsafe to drink. Try also to use that carefully because that's kind of like stating the obvious sometimes. So if you don't want to treat people like fools or stupid people, if you use the zero conditional a lot, it will make people feel like they're stupid or something. So use it carefully as well. The best tool for the job for persuasive writing is the first conditional, but again, you have other tools, second conditional or zero conditional, if you want to use it sparingly and on purpose. So that was about the conditional sentences, but let's also talk about persuasive language. Now, you can choose your words carefully to convince your reader. You can use strong verbs. Instead of I think we should, try I urge, or I strongly recommend, or I advocate for. You can emphasize benefits. Focus on positive outcomes. For example, this measure will not only save water, but also reduce residents' utility bills. Or, protecting our river benefits wildlife, recreation, and our long-term water security. And use evidence, even if general. Now, referencing facts reinforces your point. For example, you can lead with something like, as water scarcity becomes a growing global concern, then you say what you want to say, or studies show that fixing leaks can save significant amounts of water, and you continue with what you want to say. So that's also something you should consider when you want to use persuasive language, and remember to maintain a respectful tone. Even when urging action, be polite and constructive. Address the council appropriately. For example, say, "Dear council members." Don't talk to them in a disrespectful way because that defeats the purpose of persuading them, right? And now, before we wrap up a writing challenge, let's talk about the structure of a formal letter. Now, you start with your address and date at the top right, the recipient address left or below yours, and then you got the salutation. For example, "Dear council members," or "to the head of the water authority," etc. Or if you know the person, of course, you can say "Dear Mr." or "Dear Mrs." And then you move to the introduction. You state your purpose clearly and concisely. For example, "I'm writing to express my concern about and to propose," etc. And then you got the body paragraphs. You dedicate a paragraph for each proposed measure. Explain the measure and justify it, highlighting the benefits. Use your modal verbs and conditionals here. And, of course, at the end, finish with a conclusion. Briefly summarize your main point and reiterate your call to action politely. For example, you can say, "I urge you to seriously consider these proposals." Or, of course, you can come up with your own conclusions. But remember, summarize your main points, reiterate your call of action, but politely. And, of course, in the closing, you go like "sincerely" or "yours faithfully," and you finish with your signature or type name. Now let's put this all together. Your writing challenge involves combining these elements. Use modal verbs, should, must, could, to propose your solutions. Use conditional sentences, "if we do X, Y will happen," to explain the positive consequences. Structure your letter formally and use persuasive language respectfully. Well, this exercise not only helps you practice grammar and writing, but also encourages you to think critically about solutions in your own context. So I hope you try this challenge. And of course, you can share what you write with us on our website, EnglishPlusPodcast.com, or over on our Patreon page. And now we're not done. You may think that we're done, but we're not. We still have a couple of discussion questions to leave you with. So that's coming next. Don't go anywhere. I'll be right back. All right, we've covered a lot of ground today, exploring the complexities of water scarcity and access to clean water. Now it's time to reflect and discuss. These issues don't have easy answers, and hearing different perspectives is incredibly valuable. So here are a few questions I'd love you to think about and perhaps share your views on in the comment section on our website, EnglishPlusPodcast.com, or on our Patreon page. Now let me start with my first question: individual versus systemic change. Now, we talked about individual actions like shorter showers and large-scale solutions like infrastructure investment and policy. Now, where do you think the primary responsibility lies for tackling water scarcity? How much impact can individual actions truly have without systemic change and vice versa? Is it a 50-50 split, or does one side hold more weight? Now, think about that. Next, I want you to think about the price of water. Should water be treated purely as an economic commodity, with prices fluctuating based on supply and demand? Or is it a fundamental human right that should be accessible and affordable for everyone, regardless of cost? How can we balance the need for conservation, which pricing can incentivize, with the need for equity and universal access? Perhaps different pricing tiers? What are your thoughts on putting a price tag on something so essential for life? And next, I want you to think about technological optimism versus behavioral change. We discussed solutions like desalination and advanced water recycling. Do you believe technology will ultimately solve our water problems, allowing us to continue consuming at current or even higher rates? Or is a fundamental shift in human behavior, consumption patterns, and our relationship with resources like water more critical? Can technology save us, or do we need to save ourselves by changing our ways? Well, think about that. And of course, remember, share your answers with me. Next, I want you to think about the global responsibility. Now, given that water scarcity disproportionately affects poorer nations and vulnerable communities, often due to economic scarcity or climate impacts they didn't primarily cause, what responsibility do wealthier nations and individuals have to help ensure access to clean water globally? Is it charity, obligation, or simply smart long-term global policy? And finally, let's look ahead. Thinking about the future, say 20 to 30 years from now, are you generally optimistic or pessimistic about our ability to manage global water resources sustainably and ensure clean water access for all? What factors shape your outlook? What developments would make you more hopeful or more concerned? So, these are big questions, of course, but I want you to engage with us. And my friends, remember, there are no right or wrong answers, but exploring them helps us understand the different dimensions of the water crisis. So head over to the comments section for this episode on EnglishPlusPodcast.com or on our Patreon page. Share your perspective on one or more of these questions, respond to what others have said, and let's get a real conversation going. We genuinely love hearing from you and learning from your insights and experiences. And that brings us to the end of our deep dive into water scarcity and access to clean water. Now, we journeyed from understanding the difference between physical and economic scarcity to exploring the profound health, food, economic, and environmental impacts, and finally, to examining the diverse range of solutions and actions we can take from global policy down to our own homes. The key takeaway: water is finite, precious, and essential for all life. Ensuring its sustainable management and equitable access is one of the defining challenges and opportunities of our time. It requires a combination of innovation, investment, smart policy, and perhaps most importantly, a collective shift in awareness and behavior. Now, I hope this episode has not only informed you, but also empowered you, both with knowledge about this critical issue and with enhanced English language skills to discuss it. Now, remember, my friends, to practice expressing cause and effect. Try the writing challenge and use the new vocabulary you learned today. And we truly want to hear your thoughts on the discussion questions we pose. Join in the comment section on our website, EnglishPlusPodcast.com. And of course, you can also check our Patreon page where you will find the transcript for this episode, the glossary. And of course, you can also check out our website for daily posts covering vocabulary, grammar, literature, history, and much more, all designed to take your English and knowledge to the next level. My friends, if you enjoy English Plus Podcast and want to support our work, please consider sharing this episode with friends or colleagues who might find it interesting. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. And for exclusive bonus content, early access, and ad-free listening, you can unlock all our premium content by becoming a patron on Patreon or subscribing on Apple Podcasts. Your support helps us keep creating valuable content for learners like you. Thank you for tuning in today. Until next time, stay curious, stay learning, and maybe take a slightly shorter shower. This is Danny signing off from English Plus Podcast. Never stop learning.